Virgil Van Dijk. As Mr. DJ Khaled would say,
God did.
he is suffering from his own success. His own success. He is suffering from it because he gets ripped apart and torn apart and gets absolutely bashed on the timeline every single time he makes a mistake. He is probably the most, and I mean the most, scrutinized centre-back, defender, whatever you want to call it, in the Premier League and possibly the whole world. And all of it is his own doing because he used to be so incredible, so incredible, such a good defender that he was regarded as one of the best centre-backs of all time. He almost pipped Lionel Messi to the Ballon d'Or. He came second in an era where not even any other player, not even a defender, forget defenders, not even any other player could pip Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo to the Ballon d'Or, barring Modric, of course. That's how good Van Dijk was. In that 2 to 3 year stretch where Liverpool were winning Champions Leagues, where Liverpool were one of the best teams in the world, Van Dijk was that good. He was so good during that period that for some people, he may have even been the best centre-back of all time at the peak of his powers. I may not go that far, but he most definitely in that period was one of the best centre-backs, or his performance was so good that you could regard him as one of the best centre-backs of all time. And because of that, in the present day, no matter how well he plays, no matter how good he is, he will always get compared to his previous version of himself. And that's the problem right now. And that's exactly why he's constantly scrutinized, because everyone, I feel, just at some point expects him to come back to that level. But that's insane. There is no way, especially considering the injury that Van Dijk had. I mean, Van Dijk had a bloody ACL injury. Some people don't even come back from that, let alone play as well as he is right now. So even considering that, the fact that people just continue to expect, I mean, I'm guilty of this as well. At the start of this season, I was on the Van Dijk hate train as well, calling him Van Disney and everything like that as well. And that's because you sort of just remember what he used to be. And you, every single time you look at a Liverpool game or every time you watch Van Dijk, you almost expect that it'll come back and you expect those performances to come back. But the bottom line is they won't, because he was so good and he had such a big injury that is probably far-fetched. But if we forget about that and we erase our memories and we just, hey, Liverpool just bought this new defender, his name is Van Dijk. Just imagine a complete reset, and Van Dijk was this completely new player. They bought him from some second league in France. They plopped him in, and this was him. Most people would say he is incredible, because if you take this season in a vacuum, Van Dijk has been good. You know, he may not have been one of the best centre-backs. He may not have been producing performances that would regard him as one of the best centre-backs of all time, but he's still producing performances that place him as one of the best centre-backs in the league. And that's very easily so. So if we forget Van Dijk in the past and how well he used to play, because his levels, when he was at the peak of his powers, is all the way up here. And you know, maybe that's dropped down quite a bit, but if you compare it to the rest of the league and the rest of the defenders, even the best defenders, like William Saliba or Ruben Diaz, they're probably neck and neck. Van Dijk is right there with the best centre-backs in the league, but because everybody wants to compare him to his old self, which was one of the best centre-backs of all time, they always feel disappointed by Van Dijk and his performances. But forget that, compare him to the rest of the league, he is still elite and possibly the best centre-back in the league. And you can just see it week in and week out with his performances. Yes, he's had a couple of mistakes, and yes, Liverpool continue to lead goals, but I don't think you can blame Van Dijk for that, because most of those performances are to the Liverpool team as a whole and the conglomerate and its defense by committee. He by himself has had some incredible performances this season already. You know, he may have had that red card against Newcastle. He may have had a couple of passes that have led to goals, but especially with those passes, because I think that's most of the cases that people point to when this season at least, that most people have scrutinized Van Dijk most for, is because at the start of some of these games, Van Dijk has made a couple passes that have ended up leading to early goals and let Liverpool be behind straight away in the first 10-20 minutes of a game. But if you look at some of those passes, it's more the player that he's passing to's fault than himself. You know, Alexis McAllister and Trent Alexander-Arnold are not your favoured sixes to pick up the ball in pressured areas. And you can see that, all right? McAllister and Trent don't do the best in those situations. And you can't just blame Van Dijk for fizzing a pass in there and it leading to a goal. Yes, maybe he could do better. Maybe he could pass somewhere else. Maybe he could know his personnel and look longer or, you know, find a different pass. But at the end of the day, he's pursuing his best option. And most of the time in those situations, it was a McAllister or it was a Trent. And if they get pipped and it leads to a goal, I don't think you can fully blame him for that. But even if you take into that, even if you take that into account, he's still been great. He has still been as good as or better than a William Saliba or a Ruben Diaz, who have been constant. William Saliba is now being called by some people as the best centre-back in the world. I won't even go into that, but Ruben Diaz and William Saliba, he's right there. You know, Liverpool with this incredibly high line and all the attack that they have, you know, they get constantly broken on. And he is breaking up play. He is winning all of his duels. He's doing everything he can for that defense, especially when you consider the midfield in front of him isn't what it used to be. You know, Trent Alexander-Arnold sometimes comes into that midfield now, but Alexis McAllister and Dominic Szoboszlai, even Ryan Gravenberch, they aren't going to be the runners, or they aren't going to have that defensive mindset of a Jordan Henderson or a Gini Wijnaldum. And so, you know, in the past, when he was at the peak of his powers, he had this incredible workhorse of a midfield in front of him that he knew could cover for some of those counterattacks that Liverpool would almost always be broken on. But now, you know, because McAllister and Szoboszlai are so, you know, they always find themselves in the final third and they don't have quite the defensive perspective or mindset of, you know, the Hendersons or the Wijnaldums. They aren't going to break up those counterattacks as much as the other guys, right? And so I think considering that and considering how high Liverpool play and how attacking they are, constantly on the press, Van Dijk has done really, really well. Every time Liverpool get broken on, watch Van Dijk. He does his job, positionally incredible, wins his duels, and he's always breaking up those counterattacks. And so I think the criticism on Van Dijk is really, really harsh. If anything, he's almost become underrated because he is so heavily scrutinized because everybody just expects him. For some reason, they just expect him. And as I said, I was guilty of it as well. They just expect him to be as good as he used to be. And of course he isn't. Of course he isn't going to be that player anymore. I mean, he almost won the bloody Ballon d'Or, right? There's no way he'll be that. And if he is, fair fucking play, all right? Fair play to Van Dijk. But even now, even the player he is now is still good enough. It is still elite. It is still one of the best defenders in the world, one of the best centre-backs in the league. His defensive output and his performances week in and week out still show you than maybe 70 to 80% of Van Dijk's previous levels. And an off day or an off game for Van Dijk is the best another defender could ever hope for. Because Van Dijk is that good that even at 70 to 80% of himself, he is still one of the best centre-backs in the world, let alone the bloody league, all right? All right, so if there's anybody out there that is still a Van Dijk hater or still scrutinizing Van Dijk heavily, I'm talking to you. I'm talking just to you right now. Forget about everybody else. Let's have a conversation, right? If you are still scrutinizing Van Dijk, maybe because you have an agenda, which I kind of respect, all right? If you hate watch football, nobody can fix that. And if that's where you find enjoyment, fair enough. But if you hate Van Dijk because you expect more of him, I just want you to take a step back and imagine that Van Dijk is a completely new player that was plopped into the league. And judge him by that. Because I can guarantee you, if you judge him from that lens and you use a bloody kaleidoscope, really, judge him by a different perspective, look at it from a different angle, different view, any of those things, right? I can guarantee it that you will see Van Dijk in a new light. And you will see him as one of the better centre-backs and as one of the better defenders. And you don't need to call him bloody Van Disney, which is a great name, by the way. Van Disney is one of the best hate names that I've ever heard of. But I mean, looking forward for Liverpool, if their midfield, goes through some of those growing pains and they start to get a little bit better defensively, and they can track back and break up some of those counterattacks that they get broken on in the transition because they play up so high, I think this Liverpool defense will look even better. Van Dijk will continue to play himself into the season, and I think this Liverpool defense, with every, each new coming game, will get better and better and better, because that midfield will get better. They'll go through some of those growing pains. Van Dijk will only get better. And for God's sake, give Van Dijk a consistent partner next to him, because one game it's Matip, one game it's Gomez, one game it's Kanate, because he can't stay bloody fit. And so he's constantly having to switch partners every other game. And, having a consistent partner helps. It helps with defensive stability, continuity, communication, all those things. This Liverpool defense will only get better. I think, at least. Those growing pains, they could look absolutely elite defensively. They can start to pick up a little bit more clean sheets. And Van Dijk will only look better. All right? So stop scrutinizing. Leave him alone. And keep calling him Van Disney if you want, but leave Van Dijk alone. That's the premise of the story. He's not overrated. If anything, he's underrated.